Before we go into our interview today, I wanted to let everyone know we have a new sponsor for our Energy Question podcast, the U.S. Oil and Gas Association, or USOGA for short. First established in 1917, USOGA has been an effective and creative voice for the industry for more than a century now. USOGA is dedicated to educating the public, policymakers, and legislators at the federal, state, and local levels about the value of the domestic oil and natural gas industry. If you're in the industry and not currently a USOGA member, please consider joining the association as a way of helping it tell your story to the policymakers whose actions impact everything you do each and every day. You can start that process by contacting USOGA through its website, usoga.org. Thanks so much to USOGA for sponsoring the Energy Question podcast. And now on with our show.
Hey, welcome to the Energy Question. I'm your host, David Blackmon, and my special guest today is Robert Bryce, one of the great commenters and analysts in the energy space today. And also, I guess we have to add to his list of titles as a book author and everything else, now a documentary producer. Robert, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me on, David. Yeah, let me see, podcaster, film producer, dad, wonderful husband. Those are the most important denominators or important names or descriptors. But yes, film producer. This is my second documentary project. It's also called Juice, like the first one, but Juice, Power, Politics, and the Grid, available for free on YouTube, juicetheseries.com. I'm going to say that about 100 more times before we're done here, David. juicetheseries.com.
Well, I'm going to say it a lot too, because we're going to just focus on it. I watched it last night with my wife, and we were just really blown away with all the information contained. It's 5 22-minute episodes, and it just goes in a real hurry, and it's just so wonderfully produced and really well done. And I just can't, I don't have enough good things to say about it, really.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you. Before we started, I credit for that, how it looks, how the feel of it goes to my colleague, Tyson Culver. He directed the project. He, found the animators, the composer, the editors, the other co-producers, he really stitched it all together. And you mentioned it's 5 parts, and it is 5 parts, about 20 minutes each. And we wrestled with that because our first project, Juice, How Electricity Explains the World, which came out 4 or 5 years ago, was an 80-minute feature. But when we started working on this project, we realized, doing an 80-minute kind of lecture on the grid is not going to be the most conducive to getting people to watch it. And so we thought, and the world is, of course, moving to shorter form content. So we decided, let's make this shorter. I mean, it's not TikTok length, but it is, I think 20 minutes, people can afford to, watch it in one sitting, watch all 5, or they can sit and watch one. And then, Tyson just did a great job. I mean, a lot of credit here goes to him.
Why did you choose now to produce this second documentary? Is it just the status of the transition that's, everything's moving so fast. It's just crazy, crazy world.
It is. There are several reasons why now, but the biggest one was, of course, 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years ago now, we got blacked out during Winter Storm Uri. I didn't have power for 48 hours, and I live right in the center of Austin, Texas. And then in the aftermath, of course, we found out that the ERCOT grid came within a few minutes of total failure. And Bill Magnus made those points in the wake of the disaster. Well, Tyson and I talked about that, and then, a few other things happened in the aftermath, and we just realized, well, look, if this can happen in Texas, the energy capital of the world, the state that produces more hydrocarbons than any in the world, well, there's something wrong here. And further, once we started looking around and realizing, well, no, the grid is being fragilized all around the country. And also in talking with my friend Meredith Angwin and other people in the aftermath, and realizing all around, the people don't understand the grid. They don't understand, why it's being fragilized. And so that was our motivation. And, thanks to some, friends, family, foundations, we raised the money, and we decided we're going to make it free on YouTube because we want to change the conversation. That's the goal with this whole project, is we want to, and I'm flattered by your comments, but we take the grid for granted, and we take its importance for granted, and we ignore its fragility at our extreme peril.
Yeah, one of the things you'll learn by watching the documentary, folks, is the pernicious influence on how the grid is built in Texas, California, UK, elsewhere. The pernicious influence that's resulted from these things. These grids are modeled on the Enron model. These are Enron base grids that we're running in Texas and California, and that of course helps to explain why we're having so many reliability issues with them, because it all goes back to the treatment of electricity as a commodity, right?
Well, and that's the main one of the key points, and it's something I ask a lot of guests on my podcast about electricity. Is it a service or a commodity? And there's a little bit of humming and hawing, but even the the people who are the conservatives are saying, well, it's a service. And this is something, it's interesting. My first book was on Enron. It was called Pipe Dreams, Greed, Ego, and the Death of Enron. It came out 22 years ago. Yeah. And here I am all these 2 decades later, I'm still talking about Enron, because what Enron pioneered was this idea, this old vertically integrated model of the electric sector is outdated, and we need to update it, and we need to make it, more of a market. Why? Because Enron wanted to trade around it. Yeah. So they wanted to do in natural gas, in electricity, what they'd done in natural gas.
They wanted to trade and manipulate around.
Right. Exactly.
Let's be honest about what Enron.
Sure. And that's what they did both in California and in Texas, as soon as the markets were, as Ken Lay called it, restructured. But the problem with this, and just a quick side note, when I was reporting on the Enron book in early days, and I did over 200 interviews before, in a 6-month period, and I wrote that book in 6 months with Pipe Dreams, and it came out in October of 2002. I interviewed Jim Walzell, who had worked at Houston Natural Gas, and he said to me, Bryce, I don't think this deregulation, the electricity thing, is going to be good for the consumer. And he was right. That when now we see in the wake of Winter Storm Uri, all these supposed gains that we were going to have because of restructured markets have all gone away. California's electricity rates are skyrocketing. They have one of the most unreliable grids in North America. And we're still now, that's restructuring, this deregulation, genie's been, this, I don't know, rat infestation has been let out of the bag, and now we can't put it back. And so, because there's so many competing interests. But I think this, electricity is a hard thing to understand. It's a very complex business. And there are 3,000 electricity providers across the country, and, incredibly complex system. And it's amazing it all works. But that's why we made this documentary, juicetheseries.com, juicetheseries.com. It's free on YouTube.
Watch it. And, I'm in Texas, of course, and my big concern is how the Texas grid is structured and operates. We got through the January freeze pretty well. There was one that Monday morning on the 15th, I think it was, where it was pretty close. But turned out, in the natural gas system, the reforms that have been made since 2021 seem to have had a very positive effect, identifying all that critical infrastructure, so ERCOT doesn't turn the power off to it. But does that mean we're out of the woods in Texas? I don't think it does, but I wonder what you think.
I don't think it does either. And one of the points that is being made, or was made in the film, and is made by Meredith Angwin, who wrote her famous book, Shorting the Grid.
Fantastic book.
Became something of a celebrity, an more unlikely trip to, or, voyage to kind of celebrity status in the electric sector than what she's done. A self-published book from a woman who's a grandmother living in rural Vermont, but she is an authority. But she calls it the fatal trifecta. And before I get to that, I'm pro-natural gas, adamantly pro-natural gas. The U.S. is has incredible abundance of natural gas, but we're making our grid too reliant on gas. And she calls it the fatal trifecta: over-reliance on renewables, or wind and solar. Let's be clear. I don't use the word renewables anymore. Or clean or green. Those are marketing terms. Over-reliance on wind and solar, over-reliance on natural gas, and over-reliance on imports. That's the fatal trifecta. And that is this disease that is now spreading across the electric grid in the United States, without any kind of understanding at a high level of what this means for reliability.
And apparent caring. I mean, when you look at the situation in California, I mean, I think it's not just a lack of understanding, it's also a lack of apparent caring. The episode 3 with a whole piece about CARB and the lady that runs CARB and her completely dismissive and uncaring attitude about the horrific impacts of what their policies are having on poor minority communities in Los Angeles and all over California is just strictly astonishing to me. How do we explain this kind of an attitude among the people toward these politicians towards the people who form up their main base of voters?
Sure.
It's just really amazing.
Well, it is this climatism, this environmentalism, and I think in some ways many liberalism in that regard, whether over compassion for the poor and compassion for the middle class, but particularly environmentalism, that is conservationism, the idea of saving nature. It's been replaced by climatism and renewable energy fetishism. I mean, we've got this entire cadre of elites. Let's call it, it's kind of
that's what I call them.
Cheesy way to think about it, but people who are in what I think Joel Kotkin calls them the clerisy, right? So the bureaucracy, the academics, the people who are heading these big NGOs and the rest of it, the clerisy. They're not connected to the working class. They have no connection to the people who turn wrenches and, the people who build things, grow things, fix things. Those are the people I love and hope to represent in my work. But they're completely removed from that idea, from those people, the working class. And so they are promoting these policies that ultimately are very regressive, reduce the affordability, reliability, and resilience of the electric grid, and they don't care. I mean, it's because it's become a very they're so separated. And one of the strongest voices, I mean, many voices. We have more than 30 on-camera interviews in the 5 episodes. Jennifer Hernandez, who's a civil rights lawyer in California, and as a friend of mine, she speaks out very forcefully, saying that
she's very
California
impressive.
Politicians have just abandoned the poor in this, and this idea. Oh well, climate. Okay, well, yes, climate. My answer is yes, climate is a concern. It's not our only concern. We have to balance our action on climate change with all these other issues. And it's one of the reasons why, we have to, if we're serious about this over the long term, we have to get serious about nuclear energy, which is one of the main other points in the docuseries.
Yes, and I want to get to that, but first I want to just make one last point about this. I remain optimistic that we can make things better, maybe not fix everything in Texas, but make things better because we do have policymakers in Texas who I believe really want to make the system work better for everyone.
Yeah.
But in California, I feel like it's almost a lost cause. It's really a true third world situation now in California, where you have this set of policies and structure on the grid that have created now a permanent underclass of people who cannot, and will not have access to adequate electricity in their lives, right? And I just don't see any way out of it without some sort of sea change.
The supplies may be enough, but the price is going to be prohibitively expensive.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that is so important about California as the bell cow, or the bellwether in terms of these ideas around climate and climate action and the rest of it. California has some of the richest people in the world. It also has the highest poverty rate in America.
Yeah.
I'll repeat, California has the highest poverty rate in America. That's not my number. That's the Census Bureau calculations based on cost of living. And what has happened since 2008 when Schwarzenegger issued an executive order? It wasn't voted on by the assembly initially, but mandated renewable energy for the utilities of, I think at that time it was 30%. It's now 100%. Electricity prices in California have gone up at a rate 3 times faster than the rest of the U.S. 3 times faster. And California now has some of the most expensive electricity not just in the U.S., in the world. In San Diego, this Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers, in San Diego, 1 kilowatt hour of electricity now costs 48 cents. I mean, it's just insane what is happening in that state. There's just no sensibility about making sure that we keep power affordable and making the grid resilient and reliable.
Oh, that's insane. I mean, that's Germany level.
Yeah, they left Germany in the dust. Germany's a piker compared to San Diego. Now, the other major cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, those numbers are slightly lower, but still, these are just insanely high numbers, and there's no way back now for California. Those rates are going to continue going up, and one of the most there were so many things we wanted to include, but we can't include everything, right? You have to, like a book project or anything you write or whatever, you have to say, okay, well, I only can focus on this right here. But the other part of this is that despite all this massive amount of money that's been spent in California, their CO2 emissions from their electric sector on an overall basis haven't declined. I mean, that's just
Complete
crazy.
insanity.
Yeah.
So, but let's focus the rest of this on nuclear, because I agree with you. I completely agree with the thesis at the end. Natural gas is important. Renewables have a role to play. It's all important. But at the end of the day, we're going to have a massive expansion of nuclear if we're going to meet any of these climate goals, aren't we?
Well, and yes, I'm adamantly pro-nuclear. I'm also very sober about this, David, because there's none of this is going to be cheap. And we say this,
Right.
this won't be cheap, quick, or easy. It's going to take sustained commitment and long-term investment, long-term thinking, which is in woefully short supply in this country. I mean, woefully short supply in capital markets, but in politics. Oh, it's just the next 4-year cycle, the next 2-year cycle, the next quarter, the
The
next
next
year.
quarter, yeah.
Yeah. So, but if we are serious, then we have to get serious about nuclear energy. And there are some positive things happening in the U.S. But I think Canada is clearly, and when episode 4, which we call the nuclear renaissance, we go to Canada because it's clear now, and it's even more clear since we finished that Canada is going to lead the revival of nuclear around the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're making big commitments, and that's due to, in large part to my friend Chris Kiefer, who's featured in the film. He's a more unlikely kind of hero. He's a 6'9" 6'9" emergency room doctor in Toronto, who's a recovering leftist who realized, hey, we're serious about all this climate stuff and serious about the grid. We need to be serious about nuclear. So he has led that charge and done an amazing job. And, a lot of the credit, not all the credit, a lot of that credit is due to him.
Yeah, well, he's a fantastic spokesperson. He just does an incredible. I'm a communications guy. I used to coach people. Yeah. That guy he doesn't need coaching. He's just
and he's got charisma, and he's got a great story, right? He's not another one of these stinking PhDs. He's a medical doctor. He is an MD. Right. He is actually Dr. Chris Kiefer. Right. And he works in the emergency room. He's on the front lines. He's traveled all over the world. So, yeah. And Canada has other advantages. They have their own nuclear reactor design, the CANDU, which is native to them, that uses heavy water. They have abundant uranium that they can essentially just dig the rocks out of the ground and throw them in the reactor. The damn thing works. So Canada has a lot of advantages. But I think Europe as well, if we're serious about the nuclear comeback and where it's going to happen, it's going to happen in Europe. I think much more quickly than it will in the U.S. For a lot of reasons. One is that the governments are going to be much more motivated, particularly in the wake of Russia-Ukraine. But also, I'm just checking now what the price of gas at TTF is today. It's here it is. It's almost $9. I'm sorry, $8.92. But here in the U.S., it's what, $2.10, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. It's crazy.
Well, wait a minute.
Crazy.
The front month is $2.03.
Oh my gosh,
$2.
That's not sustainable.
2.029 cents per million cubic feet, or per million BTUs per 1,000 cubic feet. So in Europe now, nat gas is 4.5x the price here in the U.S. So that price alone makes nuclear more attractive in Europe. Right. But it's not just the price, of course, it's the supply. And with Russia now and Nord Stream and all the other issues around that, then that becomes more problematic. And by the way, I just pulled up the Bureau of Labor Statistics. December of last year, San Diego, a kilowatt hour of electricity was 47.7 cents. San Francisco, 35 cents. Los Angeles, 29 cents. The national average was 17 cents.
My bill is 11 cents. I have an 11-cent contract, and I thought I was paying higher rates. So you talk about there being no way back in California from what the path they're on, which is not surprising. And that's going to have a pernicious influence in some of these other states that copy California policies. But here in Texas, the governor last year created a task force to look at ways to speed up the adoption of more nuclear in Texas. Do you think that can have a positive impact on kind of helping change directions here in Texas?
Well, potentially. again, I'm pro-nuclear. I've been preaching the same thing now for close to 15 years. Natural gas to nuclear, end to end. If we're serious about decarbonization, this is the way forward.
Right.
But we have to be very sober, David, about what impact nuclear can have over the long term and near term in the United States. Remember, the US has right now 1.3 roughly terawatts of installed generation capacity. So that's 1.3 million megawatts of installed capacity. 1.3 million megawatts. Okay, so let's say Texas or California or New York. Oh, well, we just installed 70 megawatts of SMRs. 70. Well, 1.3 million divided by 70 is a small number, right? A very,
Certainly is.
so the scale of the electric grid in the US is just enormous. I mean, it's just a staggeringly large system. And so we've built it over the course now of 142 years or so. We're not going to change this over just rapidly. It's going to be very incremental. And we have to keep that in mind as well as we look at how this system evolves over time, because that's what we've had, this evolution over time. So we have to make sure we're very sober and very clear-eyed about how quickly things can change.
Another holdup for nuclear is that our regulatory system at the federal level is still stuck in the post 3 Mile Island China syndrome days of the 1980s. Are you aware of anyone in Washington who is taking a serious look at figuring out ways to streamline and modernize the regulatory system I can't talk, regulatory system at the federal level?
Well, I'm hopeful there, but again, this is going to be a very gradual and process.
Yeah.
We're seeing more bipartisan support for nuclear in Washington. There have been a number of bills passed. There's a focus on the fuel side of it, but I would say, yes, the regulatory issue is one part of it. So as I say, there are three big challenges facing new nuclear. And I wrote this on my Substack, robertbryce.substack.com.
You should look at that, folks. It's really fantastic. So much information. Anyway, go ahead.
So regulation, capital, and fuel. So regulation, the NRC being the regulatory part of this, but you're not going to solve the capital part. Bankers, lenders, investors are not going to come into the nuclear space unless the regulatory part of this is resolved. And then the fuel part of the other part, which is going to be a very difficult part of this as well. We need to be mining uranium in the United States. We need to be processing it in the United States. Right now, about a quarter of all the nuclear fuel in the U.S. is still coming from Russia. So all of these things together have to be addressed, and they have to be addressed all at once, and they have to have some urgency behind them. So, how I think about these things is very, we have to be very sober, and but we also, in all of this, we have to be thinking about the grid and what does this mean for the grid, and how do we make sure we keep it affordable, reliable, and resilient. And you can see my docuseries, juicetheseries.com, Juice the Series. How's that? Am I selling the soap here, Blackmon?
No, and we're going to let you do it again at the end here. And just so everyone knows, all my fellow Texans, need to know that when you talk about uranium mining in the United States, South Texas has an enormous wealth of underground uranium that can be easily gotten to. Had a big boom in it in the 1970s down in Live Oak, San Patricio, B County, Karnes County area. And it's all still sitting there waiting to be produced. Could be a tremendous economic boom for South Texas if it ever comes around again. So these are things
is that the in situ mining? Is it that they can inject water and then there's really not much surface disturbance with
very little surface disturbance. You can farm around it, continue farming around it while it's being done. We had a tiny little bit of interest on our farmer family farm in Goliad County, but I had some cousins that got stinking rich off of it in the 1970s because I believe it was DuPont put a plant down there just outside of George West, Texas, and made a lot of people very wealthy in Live Oak County during those days. So,
hey, so can I suggest that we just talk a little bit about my favorite episode? I mean, I have 3 kids. They're all my favorites, or I don't have a favorite child, but all 5 episodes, I'm proud of all 5 episodes of this docuseries, but I'm particularly proud of episode 3, called Green Dreams, because we focus on the Osage Nation.
Oh, yes.
I'm a proud native of Oklahoma. Both of my folks are born and raised in Oklahoma. I have deep roots in Oklahoma. My great uncle, Ernie Rapp, was a member of the Osage tribe. He was born in Fairfax, Oklahoma in 1909. And so he had a front row seat to the Reign of Terror. Well, so
Oh my
this is
God.
personal to me,
Yeah.
the story that we tell there, because of the Osage Nation's fight in court against Enel, the Italian company. And the company is so clearly violated the Osage tribe's sovereignty,
Intentionally
and
and willingly.
intentionally did so after being told twice by the Bureau of Indian Affairs they were mining rock that belonged to the tribe without a permit. The tribe owns the mineral estate. So all of this is very reminiscent of The Killers of the Flower Moon, and the movie is now out with Scorsese's new film, nominated for 10 Academy Awards. And this story, as incredible as it is, and I started reporting on it 4 years ago. That's one of the main points we're making, one of the focal points of episode 3. And we're in the right place at the right time, I suppose. But just in December now, a federal court judge in Tulsa ruled that all 84 wind turbines that Enel built in Osage County, Oklahoma, violating the sovereignty of the Osage Nation, have to be removed. And I got to tell you, David, that makes me so happy. I mean,
No,
my uncle, I'm sure he's smiling ear to ear. My cousin Nora Rapp Medley, who owns an Osage headright, she's thrilled beyond measure with this. So it's just an incredible story. We have interviews with 5 members of the Osage tribe. We're going to be screening the film in Tulsa and in Gray Horse, Oklahoma, which is right near Fairfax, in a couple weeks. And so very proud of that episode. And so I wanted to make sure and give that a shout out.
No, and that's such a fantastic outcome, but I assume the Italian company will fight it and appeal and delay as long as they can. And I mean, but what do you think the prospects are that that particular company will ever end up really taking those turbines out of there and restoring the land to its previous condition?
I think the possibility is the likelihood is very high.
Well, I hope so.
The tribe is very clear. I interviewed Everett Waller, the chairman of the Osage Minerals Council, on my podcast a few weeks ago, and he said those turbines are coming down. And so think about this. Now, there have been, I'm a longtime critic of the wind industry. They don't like me. I don't like them back. I mean,
Exactly. I feel the
way I've
same
seen
way.
this industry operate in rural America is reprehensible. I mean, overall, just reprehensible how they've acted. Oh, the way they've steamrolled local communities. And it's big business against rural Americans, and they're being supported by big law firms, big banks, and big NGOs. But the tribe has been very clear from the beginning. They want those turbines taken out. And so imagine this, there have been a few wind turbines taken down in America due to local opposition and other things. But 84 turbines is unprecedented, and at a cost potentially to Enel of $300 million. It will cost the company more money to take them down than it costs to build them. And don't forget, even if the turbines stay up, which I think is unlikely, because all the Osage tribal members I've been talking to, and again, I've been reporting on this for a long time, they're unanimous in their feeling. Those turbines are coming down. We're going to make sure they get taken out. But the tribe is also seeking compensatory damages. And when I asked Everett Waller, how much are you asking for? He said, well, I'm not going to tell you, but it rhymes with millions. so, I mean, we're talking a very large sum here. And, I can't tell you how happy it makes me because, those deep roots in Oklahoma. My father is very proud of his Indian heritage. I'm a member of the Cherokee tribe. I'm proudly so, but it was going back to Oklahoma and really understanding what has happened there and understanding what a landmark ruling this is, or landmark ruling for Native American sovereignty in the United States, landmark ruling in how it's an enormous black eye to the wind industry, and just an incredible embarrassment to Enel, a company that never stops touting how green they are. Well, and yet here they just went in and just, ran roughshod over an Indian tribe, a Native American tribe. And guess what? Can't do that, mother. Can't do that, fella. That doesn't work.
Yeah. One of the aspects of that episode, by the way, just as an aside, I spent 20 years of my career as a company liaison with a variety of different tribes in New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming, was the fact that the Bureau of Indian Affairs actually stepped in and did something, because the history that I experienced with the BIA during those years in the 90s and aughts was that they wouldn't do anything. I mean, you couldn't get them to do anything. So that was actually one of the most encouraging things to me, was that the people at the BIA actually stepped up and defended the Osage in this lawsuit. So, it's a fantastic story, and I wish them all the best. I truly do hope they succeed in everything they're trying to do there.
Well, it's been a very long battle. And a lot of the credit here goes to the principal chief, Jeffrey Standing Bear, who my family and his family have known each other for a long time. He went to school at Bishop Kelly High School in Tulsa and knows my brother and my sister. I was in a class with his brother Patrick in when I was in high school. So I've known them for a long time, but they were very committed to this.
Yeah.
They were not going to be run over with or without the feds behind them. I think, the support from the Interior Department was kind of on and off, kind of lukewarm with the tribe. But they were very resolute in their opposition in this case. And Standing Bear's a lawyer and an expert on Native American law. And, they stuck to their guns on this. And it is a remarkable ruling. I mean, really a remarkable ruling. And for Enel, and I will say this, I'll say it here, Enel has repeatedly lied in the press about this case. They have said, oh, we didn't know. Well, no, you knew, because in the 2014 letter from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they sent to the company, it said, you have to get a permit. And now they're saying, oh, we didn't know. We didn't mean to, no, they knew. And now they are, in fact, lying in public about this. I mean, they're very clear, and it's just kind of bald-faced lying about it, which is truly, indicative of this kind of, I don't know, two-facedness, right? About, corporate responsibility. This is in the age of ESG and DEI and, and corporate responsibility and the rest of it. And here they are just lying repeatedly in public about their misbehavior, and they're going to pay dearly, I think.
Yeah. Well, they should. Listen, we're up against time.
Sure.
But before we go, and again, I just can't recommend this product highly enough to folks. You need to watch it. You need to absorb it. I'm going to watch it again later today because I always get more out of a documentary the second time than the first time. But before we go, give everyone, you talked a little bit about it, but tell everyone where they can find you, follow what you're doing, and support you.
Thank you. So the new documentary is Juice, the Power, Politics, and the Grid. It's available for free on YouTube. The easiest way to find it is juicetheseries.com. We have links to all 5 episodes there, as well as a whole bunch of other content with short snippets of interviews we've done with different people who are in the film, different snippets from different episodes. So juicetheseries.com. I'm writing almost exclusively at Substack these days, robertbryce.substack.com. I know, David, you write there, and I just love Substack. I love the platform. It just gives me a lot of freedom. And
hey, I've seen you at Real Clear Energy a couple of times here recently. And that's
and my
a great
friend
platform too.
My friend Jude Clemente edits Real Clear Energy, and so I love Jude, and so I like to write for him occasionally as well. So yes, so I'm fully employed here, David, between all between the podcast and the writing and speaking and the film and the rest of it. But I'm incredibly fortunate. I'm, fortunate to have friends like you to help me, talk about what I do. But all of this business, energy and power, this is my purpose and my passion. This is what I do. I don't play golf. I'm not doing anything else. I'm not quitting. I'm not retiring. I'm all in on this.
Same here.
But yes, juicetheseries.com, robertbryce.substack.com.
Fantastic, man. Thank you so much let's make a habit of this, doing this on a regular basis.
That'd be a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And thanks to our extraordinary producer, Eric Burrell, and the Sandstone Group for hosting our podcast. I'm David Blackmon. That's all for now.